Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. I'm thrilled to have you here. Today we're going to explore the psychological masterpiece that is Silent Hill 2. I picked this game as one of the two that I'm going to be reviewing this week because I feel that they share similar themes, not necessarily plot points per se, but storytelling elements. Second game or series is the Remedyverse, so that's Alan Wake, Control, and Alan Wake 2, which recently came out this year. I think there's a lot of similarities between these two games. Again, not in its narrative structure or the way that it's telling a story about, rather. But instead, the small town feel, the descent into madness, a lot of the personifications of the mental traumas and mental illness that the protagonist experiences, all of this is front and center in both of these games. And for that reason, I'd really like to talk about them both this week. So consider this video as a part 1 of 2, with the follow-up video on the Remedyverse coming soon. Later this week, hopefully, but we'll see how editing plays out. One of the reasons that I picked this game out of the Silent Hill series is because I feel that very few games, even today, capture both the tangible horror and the humanity behind coping with grief and guilt as poignantly as Konami's 2001 release does. While visually dated, its maturity and its emotional authenticity remain unparalleled in many ways. Just as a bit of backstory on what this game is about, our flawed yet sympathetic, I would say, protagonist James seeks closure after receiving a letter from his deceased wife imploring him to return to the sleepy lakeside town of Silent Hill. Through this haunting and super thoughtful narrative, the player comes to confront truths about loss, about repentance, and about this duty and responsibility that we feel we owe loved ones, even when those bindings, even when those ties start to fall apart. How quickly danger and how quickly the need to be there for somebody can bring back these feelings of responsibility, especially for family, like a wife or a daughter. And some examples, I think, of the physical element of the horror. Pyramid Head, for example, is this big, hulking, slowly walking after you. He's basically, in my opinion, a metaphor for dread. Aside from all of his lore specific stuff, the reasons why he's actually in the story, which we can get into at a later date, certainly, the way that he's portrayed and the way that he never charges at you. He's not like your standard zombie that's, I'm chasing after you. Think about the games like Bloodborne or even Alan Wake, like we're going to talk about later. Those monsters in the dark will charge at you. He doesn't really do that. Pyramid doesn't really do that. He, hulks at you. He walks really slow and menacing, and in many ways like the movie It Follows, if anyone's seen that, where the premise of the movie, which is absolutely terrifying, is that there is something consistently coming towards you. When it catches you, it kills you, and you don't know what this thing looks like. Now, in Pyramid Head's case, we do know what the thing looks like, and it's absolutely terrifying. Another example of the nurses, the faceless nurses that are writhing and just later on in the game, it's terrifying. And I think that plays into fear of hospitals, right? I'm not someone who has this, but I know a lot of people in my family who do, who have seen a family member pass away in the hospital. They have a fear of ever being inside one again. And I think that the nurses in this game really warp that fear into this, brilliant way where if you are, it's almost mean, but if you are the kind of person who has that type of trauma, it's almost like this specific horror element was made for you, and it's like a very personalized kind of terror. It's interesting. And then lastly, the babies, those, if you guys remember the babies that burst from the arcade cabinets and they crawl after you in the beginning, that's obviously, we can talk about the symbolism of that, but that's traumatizing in several ways. So The masterstroke, I think, of this series is how it inspires self-reflection from even the most well-adjusted players. I like to think I've got my emotions, my past under wraps, as one might say, and even like I should. I'm a person too, but yeah, even someone who's pretty desensitized to horror and self-reflection, ego death, this game did a number on me, both when I first played it and then when I played it again over a holiday break to make this video. It's almost like I played two separate games, not just because it's so dated now compared to what it was. Not an issue for me. I like retro games, but for me more it was just how much has changed in how I see James's struggle. Like, now I am about his age. When I played this game, I was like a teenager, for example. And so it's like, how would I approach things differently now than I did before? I think a game like this that we come back to after a number of years, I think does really well for this. So another thing I wanted to bring up is this game has a great tie-in, not explicit, but a spiritual successor in many ways to Jacob's Ladder. If you've seen that movie, not the most recent one, the original one, that movie has a lot of similarities to the Silent Hill game, both in the protagonist sort of losing who he is and descending into madness. And I also think that these games have a similarity to the Twin Peaks universe. In fact, I know they do because there was a period of time in the early 2000s when everything was inspired by Twin Peaks in Japan because it was super big out there like it was here. But aside from that, the small town feel, right? Silent Hill itself feels like a post Black Lodge Twin Peaks kind of a thing, and it's really cool how that works. And it works very well for me anyway, going through the game. But that being said, the concept that's held constant between Jacob's Ladder, between the Remedyverse, between Silent Hill and Twin Peaks, all of these, the common thread is that the only way out is through. Which means the only way to get to out of this mess is to go through this mess. And that should sound very familiar because in life, the way that we deal with things, the way that we deal with complex situations sometimes is, avoidance. We don't want to go to the dentist. We don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation with a business partner or with a loved one. But sometimes the only way out of your current discomfort and your current levels of stress and dissatisfaction is by going through the difficulty. And if you've got, health issues that you need to take care of, mental health issues that you haven't taken care of, it's probably very scary to go and admit these to a psychologist, very scary to go and get, prescribed. And as many people think about it, like willingly numb yourself to a lot of your own inner pain, but it's not like that at all. It's really more just finding the root causes of the demons inside of you and finding a way to overcome them or live with them or simply move past them. And that is a lot more like how this game plays out than the average video game, right? You're not out there killing a god, right? You're not a teenager in a Japanese high school who with his fellow students uncovers a conspiracy and fights off an intergalactic terror that's going to destroy the world. These games are nothing like that. You're literally trying to find your daughter in this game. In the Remedyverse, you're trying to find your brother. In Alan Wake, you're trying to find your wife, right? And it's not the trying to find somebody that makes this story work. It's how personal and how tight a narrative is when you're on an individual journey for yourself, which life really is, as opposed to this self-sacrificing, I'm going to save the world at the expense of everything that I hold dear. That is asking a lot of somebody. And for society or for an authoritative figure to ask that of us, I hesitate to give that. So the last point that I'll make here is that while the gameplay and frankly the voice acting kind of show their age a little bit, I mean, it's a 23, 24-year-old game at the time of this video being recorded, the writing and the pacing of the game are phenomenally evocative for a B-movie horror setting, which frankly is what Silent Hill could have been if they didn't play into it this well. You have this like immersive way of finding the lore through environmental cues, very similar to Dark Souls games or even the Remedyverse, which again, another similarity there. Notes, audio logs, ghosts themselves will share these vignettes on domestic abuse, terminal illness, like survivor's guilt, societal isolation. It's heavy, and rarely, even now, has our favorite creative medium, video games, highlighted mental health issues so courageously. And I would say that's doubly true for the time that this game came out, because nobody, if you think about what else came out in 2001, right, which is when this game came out, there wasn't a whole lot of psychological dissertations on grief being put out there on consoles, because nobody knew if that would work or not. This was very much experimental, and it happened to work because they did it very well. And I'm consistently moved, personally, by recalling my first playthrough decades back. As I sat during the credits, I remember the credits rolling, the music was swelling, and it's like after the big twist, which I won't spoil in this video, you get this like calm sensation of release. It's like I was going through that journey as well with the guy, and then when it was over, I felt like, even if the game doesn't give the main character a lot of positive closure at all, no spoilers here, I felt like I had it. And so I thought it was great. And I think looking back at it now, one of the reasons I like this game so much is that it doesn't trivialize these real issues that are afflicting countless people. It actually encourages us to acknowledge the wounds privately and also in a profound way, which is like the way that Pyramid Head and all the monsters, like we talked about, this really visceral, the visual aspect of mental health, right? They took that concept on its head. And only after witnessing what I did this start to make more sense to me, and it was like, this is actually a very enlightening story. It's not as dark as it needs to be. It's very dark, it's very bleak, but what it results for me is something that's far more powerful and far more good than I could have asked for. If this analysis resonates in any form, I welcome any sort of respectful discussion below. Just be kind to each other. It's all I really care about. I want to know what themes or moments are etched in your memory when you first experienced this game, or did you face any of the darker facets of James's psychological journey yourself? Did you self-reflect in any unexpected way? I appreciate you all joining me. As always, we try to drop new videos each week analyzing games, tackling topics around mental health and society. If you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe or share to help spotlight art courageous enough to guide difficult conversations into daylight, like Silent Hill. The road ahead feels a lot less lonely when traveled together. So onward, friends. Have a great rest of your day, and Happy New Year.